I'm a 31-year-old woman named Mira. I've never been the kind of person who needs to dominate a room or talk for attention. I listen. I wait for pauses. I chime in when there's space. But in my family, there's never space for me. Every Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, and even the random 4th of July barbecues or summer reunions, they all play out the same way. I show up, I try to be part of the conversation, and it's like nobody even realizes I've opened my mouth. They didn't used to mean to be cruel. But lately, especially with Sienna, it started to feel more pointed, like my silence unsettled something they weren't ready to see. It's not like anyone's yelling at me or shutting me down. It's just constant interruptions, topic changes the moment I speak, or worse, people acting like I never said anything at all. I could say I just bought a house, and someone would cut in with, "Oh, that reminds me, guess what the dog did yesterday?" I'm the middle of 3 siblings. My older brother Caleb is loud, dramatic, and always has a story. My younger sister Sienna is bubbly and constantly performing, though sometimes that charm flips into sharpness when she's not in the spotlight. I've seen it a few times, mostly when the attention shifts away from her. I don't blame them for being who they are, but there's no space left when they're around. My mom is always fluttering between the kitchen and the table, jumping into conversations mid-sentence, redirecting topics, keeping the social engine running. My dad is quieter, but only because he's either zoned out or halfway buried in his phone unless someone is yelling about politics or asking for help with a smart TV. I've tried to make space for myself over the years. I've raised my voice. I've repeated myself. I've even tried talking over someone else just to test if that's the only way to get a word in. It always ends the same way, me backing off, letting them finish, and watching the conversation move on without ever circling back to me. 2 years ago, I finally said something. After a Christmas dinner where I was interrupted mid-sentence 4 separate times, I brought it up while we were cleaning up. I didn't get emotional. I just said I sometimes feel like I'm not really heard in our family gatherings. Caleb laughed. He said I was being too sensitive and maybe I should try telling better stories. My mom told me to speak louder next time and walked away before I could answer. I tried to shake it off. I really did. But this past Thanksgiving pushed it over the edge. I had just gotten a promotion at work. Something big, something I'd worked toward for nearly 2 years. I tried to share it during dinner, 3 times. Each time, someone talked over me. Not on purpose. Not with malice. Just like I wasn't there. The first time, Sienna cut in to talk about her neighbor's new dog. The second time, Mom called out from the kitchen asking where the gravy boat was. The third time, Caleb started some bit about a guy at the gym who fell off a treadmill. I gave up. I left before dessert. I told them I wasn't feeling well. I went home, sat on my couch, and didn't cry out of sadness. It wasn't that. It was more like this weird hollow feeling. Like I could disappear and no one would notice until the next holiday came around and someone realized they had one less potato to peel. A few days later, I had this idea. It wasn't a tantrum. It wasn't revenge. It was more like a test. What if I didn't talk at the next gathering? What if they didn't have my voice to talk over? Would anyone notice? Would they care? I work from home and live alone, so it wouldn't be hard to lay the groundwork. Most of my family only texts in the group chat, and even then, only when there's an event coming up. I figured I'd start a few days before Christmas to make it feel real. I looked up what could cause temporary voice loss, laryngitis, vocal cord inflammation, post-viral symptoms. Challenge. All easy to fake for a few days, especially if no one really asks questions. My friend Marina is a nurse. She helped me mock up a fake doctor's note saying I had severe laryngitis and needed to rest my voice for at least a week. I didn't plan to use it unless someone got pushy, but it felt good to have it just in case. The Monday before Christmas, I sent a message in the family group chat. I'd lost my voice after a bad sore throat, but I was fine otherwise and still planned to come to dinner. No one replied directly, just a few heart reacts and a thumbs up. Classic. I wasn't even angry anymore. I just wanted them to sit with the silence, to eat their food and fill the room with all their usual noise and maybe, just maybe, feel the absence of the one voice they never seemed to notice in the first place. I showed up to Christmas dinner 10 minutes early, carrying a notepad in one hand and a whiteboard around my neck that said, "I'm okay, just can't talk for a while," in thick black marker. I rang the bell like usual, and within seconds the door flew open. My mom nearly knocked the board off my chest when she saw it. She clutched my shoulder and started looking me over like I had just walked out of a car crash. Her hands flapped around my face, then grabbed the board, reading it like it might change if she stared hard enough. My sister peeked out from behind her, already smirking like I was pulling a holiday prank. Once I stepped inside, I headed straight for the kitchen to drop off my casserole. My mom followed close behind, still muttering about teas and gargles. I held up the notepad, scribbled just rest, nothing serious, and showed it to her. That seemed to slow her down a little, though she still looked unconvinced. In the living room, Caleb sat with his feet up on the coffee table, half watching a football game. He turned as I walked in and raised one eyebrow. Then he grinned and said I was probably faking it just to get out of debating politics with Uncle Ron. I wrote "nice try" in bold letters and flashed it at him. He laughed and shook his head. As more people arrived, something weird happened. They actually paid attention. Not in a dramatic, performative way, just small things. My mom paused mid-sentence to look at my response to something on the board. My dad glanced up from his phone and asked if I wanted sparkling water or cider, waiting while I pointed. At one point, my cousin Riley asked what I'd been up to lately. I wrote promotion at work, and for once, no one interrupted me to launch into their own news. Everyone just waited. They leaned in. They read. Caleb passed the board to Sienna, who read it and handed it back without making a joke. My dad even asked what kind of promotion, so I wrote a short summary, team lead on a new project, increased budget, bigger role. His eyes actually widened. He nodded like it meant something. It probably did. He's worked in corporate for decades, but I don't think he ever knew what I actually did until that moment. Sienna didn't love it. Halfway through dinner, her smile was tight, and she kept changing the subject back to her travel plans or her neighbor's weird dating life. but people kept asking me things. And the funny part was, I could answer without ever being cut off. I'd raise the board and scribble, and everyone would pause, eyes on me, waiting. It was like holding a remote that made people shut up. Caleb tried to crack a joke again when dessert came out. He said something like I should lose my voice more often if it meant I'd finally get some attention. No one laughed. My mom lightly swatted his arm with a napkin, which for her is about as close as she gets to scolding him in public. When my dad asked if I had any funny stories from work, I flipped to a fresh page in the notepad and wrote out one about our holiday gift exchange. I wrote it like a stand-up routine, setup, punchline, awkward pause, big finish. Took up a full page and a half. I slid it across the table to my uncle first, who read it and passed it down like a menu. By the time it reached my dad, even my mom was leaning in. It landed. They all laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from a good story and not just because someone's being loud. It was the strangest moment. No one had interrupted. No one talked over me. No one cut in with their own version. They just read it and reacted like it was normal. After dinner, everyone lingered in the living room instead of scattering to different corners of the house. I sat on the couch and wrote answers to small questions people asked. What books I'd read lately, whether I still baked, if I was still running on the weekends. My aunt asked for the name of a podcast I mentioned. I wrote it down. She actually saved it in her phone. That night, after I got home, I saw a message from my mom in the family group chat. It said, "Hope your voice comes back soon. But it was really nice having you with us today. No extra hearts. No fuss. Just that." I stared at it for a second, then put my phone down without replying. My cousin Nora hosted a small New Year's Eve get-together, just family and a few of her friends. Nothing fancy, but enough to count as the next family event. I confirmed I'd be there and reminded everyone in the group chat that I still couldn't speak. No one responded directly. Just a thumbs up from my dad and a party hat emoji from Nora. I arrived a little after 8 with my whiteboard, notepad, and a small bottle of sparkling cider. Sienna was already there, curled up on the couch with her legs tucked under her like she owned the room. The moment I walked in, she made a face and mumbled, "Still doing this?" Loud enough for a few people to hear. I lifted my board and tapped the smiley face. At first it was fine. I stood near the kitchen island, helped myself to cheese and crackers, and nodded along while people talked. Nora's playlist played softly in the background. Her dog padded around looking for drop snacks. Then my aunt leaned over and said, "You look so peaceful without having to talk," like it was some sort of compliment. I gave her a tight smile and turned back toward the fridge. The energy felt different this time. At Christmas, everyone was intrigued. Now it felt like they didn't know where to put me. My silence made people nervous. They kept glancing at my board like it might flash something dramatic. Caleb joked to one of our cousins near the drinks table, "Better not talk over Mira or she'll stop breathing next," while keeping his eyes on me. A few people chuckled, but it was awkward and quiet. I wrote "try harder" on my board and held it up. That got a laugh from Nora at least. Sienna didn't laugh. She stood up and crossed the room to refill her drink, then suddenly turned and snapped, "Okay, this is ridiculous. She's doing this for attention." Everyone froze. I calmly uncapped my marker and wrote, "You don't need to yell. I'm right here." Then I flipped it around and walked over to the chips. My mom moved fast, pulled Sienna aside near the hallway and whispered something sharp. They stayed tucked back there for a couple of minutes. When they returned, Sienna avoided me completely for the rest of the night. Gam. She didn't make eye contact, didn't acknowledge me during the midnight toast, and left without saying goodbye. My dad didn't say much the whole evening. He mostly sat on the armrest of the recliner, watching people. I caught him watching me at one point. He didn't smile or look away. He just stared like he was thinking hard about something. He didn't ask questions. He didn't join in the jokes. He looked tired in a way I hadn't noticed before. The next morning, I woke up to a long text from Sienna. It was 3 paragraphs. She said I was manipulating the family, creating unnecessary tension, and ruining what little peace we had. She said it wasn't healthy. She said it wasn't fair. I stared at it for a while, then replied with one sentence, "Interesting how me not speaking causes more drama than being talked over for years." She left me on read. Later that day, my aunt messaged me to say she didn't totally get what I was doing, but she respected it. 2 cousins texted separately, saying the vibe at New Year's was weird, but they thought maybe it needed to be. One of them admitted they'd never really noticed how much I got interrupted until now. No one else reached out. Not Caleb. Not my mom. Definitely not Sienna. I didn't plan to stop. There was another family event coming up in 2 weeks, my niece's birthday. It was being held at a park near my sister-in-law's place. I was already preparing what I'd write on the board for that one. This had started out as a small, quiet act, just a test to see what would happen if I disappeared from the conversation without actually leaving the room. But now it felt like something else. Something bigger. Like I was holding up a mirror and none of them liked what they saw. I wasn't trying to punish anyone anymore. I just wanted to see how long they'd let silence echo in the space they never let me fill. My niece Ava's 5th birthday was held at Sienna's house, which meant I already knew the tone would be different from the other family gatherings. Sienna liked control, especially when it came to how things looked and how people acted in her space. I arrived a little before the party officially started, holding a gift bag in one hand and wearing a laminated card around my neck that read, "Hi, I'm on vocal rest due to medical reasons. I'm okay, just can't speak for now." Sienna opened the door with a tight-lipped smile. She glanced at the sign, gave a short sigh, and said, "Still doing the silent thing?" I gave a small wave and pointed at the card. Inside, there were pink streamers taped along the walls, foldable tables with unicorn paper plates, and a cake shaped like a number 5 sitting on the counter. A few of Sienna's friends and neighbors were already there with their kids. Some of them greeted me politely, and when they noticed my sign, they leaned in and asked if I was okay. Sienna hovered nearby every time, cutting in quickly with, "It's nothing. She just lost her voice. Totally fine. It's not contagious." Every time I tried to write something down in response, she'd interrupt, explaining what she thought I was trying to say, even when I hadn't written anything yet. At one point, I held up my whiteboard with "How long have you known Sienna?" for one of her neighbor friends. Sienna immediately jumped in with, "Since college." I told Mira that already, didn't I? I hadn't written anything else. It got stranger when the younger cousins started noticing. Two of them came over and asked if they could draw on my whiteboard. I handed over a dry erase marker and let them doodle in the corner. Then we started a back and forth guessing game where I'd draw something and they'd shout out what it was. More kids joined in. They laughed when I drew a cartoon cat wearing sunglasses, and one of them asked if I could draw a dinosaur riding a scooter. I did. The adults started to notice. Caleb, already halfway through a bottle of beer, walked by and muttered loud enough for people to hear. Mira's turned into a mime now. Then he launched into a mock performance, tracing an invisible box around himself and pretending to climb a rope. A few guests chuckled, but not as many as he expected. My dad didn't say much the whole evening. No. But a few times I caught him watching me, not with that glazed over look he usually had at family events. This time it was different. Focused, like he was really seeing me for once. Caleb rolled his eyes, muttered something back, and walked off. My dad stayed nearby after that, watching the room like he was making sure nothing else happened. Later, while Ava was opening gifts, she picked up the card I had taped to her gift bag, a little drawing I'd done of her holding balloons. She ran over, hugged my leg, and handed me her own crayon drawing in return. I held up my whiteboard and wrote, "It's beautiful," with stars and hearts around it. Sienna snapped. She can't even say thank you, but sure, let's all crowd around her like she's the only one who matters now. The whole room stopped. Ava froze, still holding my leg. A few of the kids looked confused. My mom stepped in fast, guiding Sienna toward the kitchen and muttering something to her under her breath. Doors swung, feet shuffled, and for a minute, everyone went quiet. After things calmed down, my mom walked up to me, handed me a slice of cake, and whispered that Sienna was just under a lot of stress, and I shouldn't take it personally. Then she asked, "How long do you think you're going to keep this going?" I reached into my pocket and handed her a folded note I'd written ahead of time. It said, "Until someone acknowledges what made me go silent in the first place." She didn't reply, just tucked the note into her purse and walked away. A little later, one of my cousins laughed during cleanup and said, "Honestly, we should all get whiteboards. No one could interrupt if we had to write everything down." A few others actually agreed. One even said it might make family dinners more peaceful. I left the party quiet as always, but something had shifted. Without saying a word, I had somehow taken up more space in that room than I ever had before. A few days after Ava's birthday party, I got a text from Caleb. It was short, "Dinner? Just us? Your place or mine?" No emojis. No follow-up. Just that. I hadn't heard from him directly in months, not since before this whole thing started. I stared at the message for a few minutes before replying. My place. Thursday. If this was going to be a setup, I wanted home field advantage. That afternoon, I cleaned the apartment top to bottom, lit a few candles, and prepped a pan of vegetarian lasagna. I set the table with 2 plates, water glasses, and between the forks, my notepad and whiteboard. It felt ridiculous and strategic at the same time. Caleb showed up 15 minutes late, carrying a bottle of red wine he knew I wouldn't drink, probably because he thought it was polite. He stepped inside like nothing was off, complimented the smell of the food, and spent the first few minutes making small talk. Weather, sports, traffic. His eyes kept drifting to the board, then back to me like he was waiting for it to blink. I nodded, offered him seconds, gestured to the water jug. Didn't write a thing. 5 minutes in, he gave up. "Look, Mira, this whole thing's weird. It's making everyone uncomfortable. Can we talk like normal people?" I calmly picked up the marker and wrote, "This is the most people have listened to me in years. Why would I stop now?" He leaned back in the chair and scoffed, called it dramatic, said I'd never had a problem speaking when I wanted to. He picked at his lasagna and looked everywhere but at me. I wrote, "I've always had to fight to speak. You just didn't notice. You were the one talking over me." He didn't argue that. He looked down and let out a breath through his nose. I slid the board closer and added, "It's not silence. It's reflection. Yours, hopefully." That finally cracked something. He admitted he'd rewatched an old video from Christmas 2 years ago. Apparently his girlfriend at the time had taken a clip during dinner. Caleb had gone back to it after Ava's party. He told me he watched the whole thing twice, trying to prove I was exaggerating. "Not even one story," he said. "You started talking 3 times. Never finished a single sentence." He set down his fork and didn't pick it up again. Then he said he was planning a game night. Said he wanted to try something different, one of those party games where everyone gets turns and you can't talk out of order. Called it equal turn rules, half joking, but also not. It sounded like an apology in disguise. I picked up the marker again and wrote, "I'll come. But if anyone talks over anyone else just once, I'm leaving. No warning." He nodded, said deal. Then he asked, "But will you talk to us again after that?" I didn't write a reply. I just cleared the table and started putting leftovers in containers. He didn't push. Just helped clean up in silence and let himself out. That night, I didn't pull out the board again. I just sat on the couch, stared at the closed door, and thought about how it was the first time someone in my family had tried to meet me where I was, without dragging me back to where they'd left me. Caleb hosted game night 3 days after our dinner. When I walked in, I noticed he'd taped a large piece of printer paper to the wall, written in marker, "Interrupt, lose your turn." He'd even added a smiley face at the end, like that would soften the message. The living room was rearranged into a wide circle of chairs. There were snacks on the counter, a stack of cards on the coffee table, and music playing low in the background. It was a mix of family and a few of Caleb's friends, people I recognized but didn't know well. My mom sat near the window with a paper plate of fruit. One of my cousins balanced a drink on their knee. Sienna arrived a few minutes after me, took the seat farthest from mine, and barely glanced in my direction. Caleb greeted everyone, held up the game box, and explained the rules like a camp counselor. We played Once Upon a Time, a storytelling game where each person adds one sentence to a shared story. The catch? No interruptions. If you cut someone off, you lose your turn and sit out the next round. Caleb said it twice and then pointed to the sign again. To everyone's surprise, the rule actually worked. People paused. They waited. When someone took too long thinking, nobody jumped in. The game moved slower than it probably would have otherwise, but it also felt more balanced. When it was my turn, I typed my sentence on a tablet and passed it to a text-to-speech app I downloaded earlier that day. The robotic voice read, "The squirrel had a secret. He wasn't looking for nuts, he was hiding treasure." The room burst into laughter. Even Sienna let out a small laugh. I glanced around. No one talked over each other. The pauses had become part of the rhythm. Halfway through the second round, Caleb raised his glass and said, "To Mira, for being patient enough to wait for us to finally shut up." A few people clinked their cups together. My mom nodded. One of my cousins added, "Seriously though, since Mira started doing this, I've been realizing how much I cut people off. It's like constant." That was when the mood shifted. Sienna, arms crossed, muttered from across the room, "Okay, so Mira wins. She made everyone feel guilty, and now she's the queen of silence." Caleb didn't miss a beat. She didn't make us feel anything. We just finally noticed something she's been dealing with forever. He didn't raise his voice, just said it plainly like he'd already accepted it. My mom added from the window seat. We all contributed. And I don't think I really knew until now. Nobody moved for a second. Then the game continued, a little slower now. The silence between turns felt heavier, but not uncomfortable. Just honest. By the end of the night, people lingered. They refilled drinks, picked at leftover chips, asked about work or travel plans. I kept using the tablet. It spoke calmly, clearly, and no one rushed me. Before Sienna left, she walked over. She looked around first, then leaned in and whispered, "I don't get it, but I'm sorry. I guess we didn't really see you." She waited for a response. I nodded. But I didn't type anything. Not out of spite, just because I wasn't ready to make it easy again. As people packed up, Caleb walked over and asked if I'd keep using the app going forward, or if I planned to start speaking again. I typed a simple message and let the voice read it. "I'll keep using this for now. Not because I'm angry, just because for once people wait through the silence." He read it, nodded slowly, and helped stack chairs. On my way out, I glanced one last time at the sign on the wall. "Interrupt, lose your turn." The ink had smudged near the bottom from someone brushing against it, but the words were still clear. This time they didn't feel like a joke. They felt like a rule worth keeping. It had been 31 days since I last used my voice. At that point, it didn't even feel like a challenge anymore. Silence had become a filter, a quiet test for who would slow down, wait, and actually care enough to meet me where I was. I still use the text-to-speech app, even at work. During team meetings, I typed in updates while the robotic voice read them out. People listened more carefully than they ever had when I spoke out loud. No interruptions. No one talking over me to make a joke or spin the conversation back to themselves. Just quiet, patient attention. 3 weeks after Caleb's game night, I got a voice memo from my dad, just 10 seconds long. He said, "I've been listening to you a lot lately, Mira, even in silence. I'm sorry it took this to hear you." That was it. No over-explaining. No guilt. But just a sentence I hadn't expected to hear from him. I didn't reply right away. I saved the message and played it again later that night. 2 days after that, Sienna invited me to brunch. Just us. No family. No cousins. No kids running around. I picked a cafe downtown where the tables weren't too close and the music stayed low. She was already seated when I arrived, flipping through the menu. I sat across from her and waited. She didn't waste time. "I don't like what you did," she said. "But I also can't say you were wrong." I nodded slowly and looked at her. I didn't reach for my whiteboard. I didn't open my tablet. I just let the silence hang between us. For once, I didn't feel the need to fill the gap. She tapped her fingers on the table, then looked back at me. "You're doing it again," she said, making me sit with myself. I never realized how uncomfortable that makes me. I picked up my phone and typed a sentence into my app, then hit play. I'm not mad anymore, but I'm also not rushing back to normal. I want a new normal. She blinked, then leaned in. "Was that your real voice?" I nodded. Then for the first time in a month, I said softly, "Maybe you're just hearing it for the first time." The next morning, I rejoined the family group chat. No grand announcement, just a voice message. "Hey, it's Mira." I got my voice back. "Let me know if you're still willing to listen to it." The typing dots appeared almost immediately. One cousin sent clapping emojis. Another just said, "Always." Caleb sent me a private message. "Thanks for giving us a chance to fix it." A few days later, my mom invited me to a quiet dinner. No holidays. No decorations. Just 6 of us, her, my dad, Caleb, one cousin, Sienna, and me. She said she wanted it small, peaceful, and real. I agreed. I arrived early. The table was already set. Plain dishes, no centerpiece. Just food, chairs, and space. I sat beside my dad. Caleb sat across from me. The conversation started slow, weather, new recipes, someone's pet lizard that got lost for 2 days. When I spoke, no one interrupted. Not once. I told a story about a client presentation that went sideways when someone's toddler crashed the Zoom call. They laughed. Not over me. After me. When I paused, they waited. When I looked around, they met my eyes. My mom asked what show I'd been watching lately. I told her. She asked follow-up questions. She didn't change the subject. Halfway through dinner, Caleb asked me if I wanted to lead the next game night. Not to make fun of the silence. Not to keep the theme going. Just because he wanted to know what game I'd choose. He said, "You've got good taste. I figured you'd pick something interesting." That was the first time I'd heard him frame it like that. Like my perspective was something worth waiting for, not just background noise behind his next punchline. After dessert, while clearing the dishes, my mom hugged me. It wasn't long or dramatic, She just said, "We never taught each other how to make space, but I'm ready to start learning." I stood there for a second, then nodded and hugged her back. I never planned to go silent again. That had never been the goal. It wasn't about shutting people out. It wasn't revenge. It was about creating a pause so loud it finally forced the room to go quiet. And in that space, they'd started to hear what I hadn't been able to say for years. Now, I didn't need to whisper. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need a signboard, a fake doctor's note, or a robotic voice. I just needed a seat at the table, and people who were willing to stop talking long enough to let me speak.